Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about clothing choices that affect climate change. But first, here's what's happening on the farm. It has been a series of really, really hot days, hot and muggy, thunderstorms almost every afternoon. So all the animals around here are laying low. They are not expending a lot of energy during the day. They're eating early morning or even at night when it is cooler. And then they're hanging around in the shade during the day or in front of the fans. The sheep like to sit in front of the fan in the barn and just hang out during the hottest part of the day. On a happier note, it is also tomato season. Tomatoes, zucchinis, lots of cucumbers. So we've been making lots of pickles and pickle relish and starting to get into the whole rush on tomatoes where we will be making tomato sauce and what we call almost paste. We get it down as far as we can so it's closer to a tomato paste than a tomato sauce. So that's what's happening here on the farm. So all season we've been talking about fast fashion and how it's kind of creating a monster in our world. Too much fossil fuel is being used, too much pollution is being generated, too much textile garbage is going into our landfills, too much human damage all over the world, not just in the industry, but also in the people that are wearing the clothes, too much damage to the soil, too much water damage with those microplastics, and too much inequity is being generated throughout the world. So, slow fashion and local fashion, those are the ways that we can combat these problems. But is it easy? No way. It is not going to be easy. And is it quick? No. And what I've been saying all along is baby steps, making your choices each time you go out to buy something, and being a mindful consumer. So this time I wanted to talk about climate change and not just global warming, that is merely a symptom, but climate change in general. Climate change means the weather as a whole throughout the whole world. And what we're seeing now, it's kind of apropos that this is what we're talking about this week, is because there's been so much severe weather occurrences this week. There's been floods, there's been tornadoes, there's been hot temperatures for extended periods of time, and of course, more humidity too. And greenhouse gases is what's causing this. And how does that work? Politicians, there's a lot of propaganda out there, but let's just look at the science. So the greenhouse gases get built up, and we'll talk about how that happens. But what they end up doing is they trap the energy that's coming in from the sun within that atmosphere. It's kind of like putting a blanket on the atmosphere, and so there's no way for that heat to get out of the atmosphere because it's being held in by those gases. And they're called greenhouse gases because it's kind of like the metaphor is a greenhouse where you have the glass walls where the sun comes in, keeps everything nice and warm. And unless you can open a window or a door or put in a fan, there's no way to get that heat out. And so that's basically what's happening to our planet. Oh, and I didn't even mention, I'm now looking at the graphic here, I didn't even mention about the number of horrible fires that we've been having in the last few years, and even places that haven't been on fire and shouldn't have been on fire for a long time, or having tornadoes that never used to be in Maryland. And now it's, this summer it's been almost a weekly occurrence. So, what are greenhouse gases? So, there's water vapor that's in our air. There's carbon dioxide, there's nitrous oxide, there's ozone, and there's fluorinated gases like PFCs and HFCs, things that are coming from industries and from our air conditioning units and things like that. So, where do all these gases come from? How are they being made? And basically, what happens is that we are making a lot of power. We are generating power, and that power is being generated from fossil fuels, whether it's natural gas or diesel gas or coal. We have big power generating plants that are using fossil fuels to give us electricity. Another cause is manufacturing. So much manufacturing. Just think about it. Everything that we use in our life is being manufactured. Our devices, our clothing, of course, because that's what we're talking about. Um, our cars, everything that we think of, everything that's in your house has been in a manufacturing factory somewhere, most probably. It's not being made by artisans, it's being made in a factory. Cars and trucks and airplanes and all those things. And um, you remember those iconic pictures of the smokestacks with the pollution pouring out from above. Much of that is water vapor, but there also is containing nitrous oxides and other gases that are harmful and also become part of that blanket of greenhouse gases. We all use transportation, trains and planes and buses and automobiles and trucks and ships. All of that is taking energy to, move us and move our things around the world. We are all powering our homes and buildings on electricity, and I don't know the statistic. I would say that a very small percentage is being powered by solar at this point, even though it's becoming more prevalent to have solar powered homes and buildings. I should say that our house, our barn, my studio, it is all powered with solar power. Also, increased consumerism. We want more. We want more, so more things have to be made. So think increased consumerism means more and more and more manufacturing. And when we dispose of those things that we don't want anymore, then we're using transportation to get them to the landfill as well. So there's many ways that we're using energy systems that are releasing greenhouse gases. And the final one is producing food. Again, manufacturing of food, packaging of food, transportation of the food. And then there is, of course, animal methane. All animals burp and fart, and that produces methane. I think when I was looking this up, sheep and goats produce about 10 kilos of methane per year per animal. So on a small farm like mine, it isn't a huge problem, but it becomes more and more of a problem when you're thinking about, big industrial animal farms that have hundreds or thousands of animals. So in our world, we have what we call a sink. We have carbon sinks. So these are places where carbon is stored within the Earth system. And there are 5 major carbon sinks in our world. The first one is the atmosphere. So we have lots of carbon, CO2 in our atmosphere. That's, again, causing the greenhouse problem. We also have lots of carbon within the ocean. We have dissolved organic carbon that is there, as well as carbon that is being produced by the animals and plants that live in the ocean. Grassland and agricultural soils are also carbon sinks. especially when they're healthy, and we'll talk about that. Forests are carbon sinks. And finally, the lithosphere, that is deep down in the earth, and that's where the fossils are and the fossil fuels are. And so that is another big major carbon sink. So what's happening is we are draining that lithosphere. We're using more and more and more of the fossil fuels, and there's no way for those fossil fuel, that carbon that we've taken out, to get back into the lithosphere. It will take hundreds, maybe millions of years to get back. So we've disrupted the carbon cycle. We're taking the carbon from one place, we're putting it into a different one, and there's no way to introduce that carbon back into the earth as quickly as we are taking it out. So we have disrupted the balance of the carbon sink, the carbon cycle. The other place where we have caused a lot of disruption is the forest sinks, because as we cut down forests to make paper or to have more agricultural land, we are taking away a lot of plants, trees that are capable of sequestering that carbon within their leaves and their trunks and their roots and all of that. So we're just destroying a whole sink area without having anything to replace it with. So corporations tend to be the biggest producers of all of these greenhouse gases. And as we talked about before, corporations are going to do what they're going to do. They're going to keep doing what they're doing because it's working for them. They are making a profit. We keep buying what they are providing. And they won't change their processes to be more sustainable unless and until we start to demand that. And we have to stop buying the cheap stuff, the polluting stuff, the inequitably made things, and the unsustainable textiles that they're selling. And yes, we need to vote with our dollars and do research on those brands that we like the best. And we are seeing changes in those industries because consumers are demanding something more sustainable, particularly in Europe. Europe is way ahead of us in this area. We can catch up. We just need to do it. So we need to demand that these brands have a sustainability plan, that they are reducing the amount of waste and therefore reducing the amount of actual textiles being made. We can ask for those things and we can vote with our dollars. And a local wardrobe is also something that can address climate change, because if it's made locally, let's say, it may not be made here in Frederick, but let's say it's made in our region, there's going to be a lot less transportation used. Or even if we say, let's make it a little broader, USA made, so that it's not coming from overseas and you are using less transportation. And when you have decentralized those industries, they're typically smaller and they can be more responsive to what the customers want, to what we want. And a local wardrobe will also benefit the local economy. Just think again, even if we widen this out and say, I'm not looking at something that's made in Maryland, but let's say I'm looking at something that's a USA made product. If I'm demanding that my clothing be made in the USA, that's providing jobs for our citizens. That's providing money that is kept within our country and isn't being sent away to other countries. And can farm yarn save the planet? Well, yeah, it can, because it also addresses many of the climate change and sustainability values that we've talked about before. So basically, growing plant and animal fibers puts carbon back into the soil. Atmospheric carbon is taken by plants with using the energy from the sun. It is made into sugar, made into glucose or fructose or any or other sugars. And so the CO2 and the energy of the sun are being made so that the plant can grow and the plant can thrive, and that the plant can then be eaten and provide nutrition for other people. And these nutrients also go down into the roots, and the carbon can then get into the soils. When we talked about the grassland and agricultural land soil sink, it can go in there. So you're sequestering atmospheric carbon in the fiber and in the products, like in the roots of the system and of the plants, in the healthy soil that is made by having it being planted, by the manure of the animals that are there, and in the fiber itself. And farm yarn's also a local product, so there's less transportation. It's a smaller, more responsive industry. And yes, again, vote with your dollars. So carbon farming and regenerative ag is a topic that is gaining more and more traction out there. So carbon farming is simply using practices that reduce carbon loss into the atmosphere and promote carbon sequestration by taking the carbon in the atmosphere and actually putting it back in the plants and actually into the soil. So you are reducing what's going into the atmosphere, and then you're taking what's in the atmosphere and putting it back in the soil. So some of these practices would be to reduce the amount of erosion by putting the carbon back into the soil, by planting hedgerows and cover crops, by restoring riparian systems near the farm that is going to be growing more trees. So you're adding to that forest sink. And animals recycle carbon through their digestive tract. So you're getting the carbon that's in the manure can then be spread out onto the field, which will then feed those plants and put more carbon into the soil. So if you're going to buy farm yarn or fiber, it's important to ask about their farm practices. Not everybody will have a carbon farm plan. We don't have a carbon farm plan at this time. But we have many of those practices being used on our farm. We do have a riparian restoration going on, where we have an acre that was planted. It's nearly, it's almost 20, it's a little bit over 20 years old. The trees are getting pretty big, which is kind of nice. We do have windbreaks all around our farm because we're surrounded by forest trees. We do have cover crops. We always have something that's growing on our farm. We don't just have fallow or open dirt here. So we are doing many of those practices that are good for a carbon farm. So, ask if you're going to be buying farm yarn or fiber, then ask about their farm practices. Do they do rotational grazing like we do? Are the animals grass-fed for the most part? Is the manure put back in the soil in some way? Are they using it? And I guess most importantly is, are they doing something about sustainability? Are they interested in sustainability? So here's your call to action. I would hope that you could find a fiber farmer in your area. And there are there's a great way to do that. Fibershed.org has a map of affiliates, and they have lists of producers in your area. If you're local, go to ChesapeakeFibershed.com and click on our map, and you will find producers in our area. Also, you on Facebook and Instagram, you can follow at Chesapeake Fibershed and at Fibershed, and you can see great projects that people are doing, sustainable products that are being made, a lot of local fibery goodness happening all around the country and around the world. The Fibershed, I think I've talked about this before. There's 58 Fibershed affiliates all around the world. So wherever you are, you should be able to find some producers that are really working to be more sustainable. So until next time, let me know if you found a producer in your area. And of course, if you're local, you already know that I'm a Fibershed producer. And as always, you can leave a comment or a review. And if you have questions, send me a message or send me an email. I love to answer questions. So until I see you again, happy making.